Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah. Now, this is how you rock a mustache. It's the Arizona preview. Let's get right into it on this episode of Frogs Insider. Hey, Frog fans, welcome into another episode of Frogs Insider presented by the Flying T Club. Jamie Plunkett here. Melissa Treewasser will be along shortly. This week, she sits down with Justin Spears of the Arizona Daily Star and ESPN Tucson Radio to talk about the Frogs and the Wildcats coming up this Saturday at 2 p.m. on ESPN+. It should be a really interesting matchup. A lot of things to get into. They dive into all of it. It's the best preview out there for this game, as you guys well know by now. Melissa rocks these previews every single week. Very excited for you to hear that conversation. And yes, we are going to talk about the mustache. We are going to talk about my feelings. If you are listening to this episode and not watching this episode on the YouTube channel, I would encourage you to get over to the YouTube channel right now so that you can see me rock this thing in all of its glory. Just search Frogs Insider and we'll pop up over there on YouTube. But before we get into that, before we get into the Arizona preview, and before we talk about something that I want to get into after the preview about the Big 12 and their media rights, let's talk about the presenting sponsor of this podcast. That is the Flying T Club, TCU's NIL collective. They support over 110 TCU student athletes, and they partner with a variety of organizations in and around the city of Fort Worth. They actually just threw up some photos on their socials earlier this week about participating with the Presbyterian Night Shelter, which is one of my personal favorite nonprofit organizations in Fort Worth. It's a homeless shelter. They deal with a lot of families. They deal with a lot of young children. And TCU student athletes went over there and spent a day at Presbyterian Night Shelter volunteering and helping out. A really great organization. You can go check them out just by searching for Presbyterian Night Shelter as well. But Flying T Club, they do a lot of really cool work. They're a 501c3 nonprofit, which means your gift to them is tax deductible. And on top of being tax deductible, you also get priority points through TCU and the Frog Club. So it's a win, 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 and a win because the student athletes win, the nonprofit organizations win, you win in two ways, which is a double win for you. So go over to flyingtclub.com and check out the Flying T Club today to see how you can get involved. You can make an individual contribution, or they're open for corporate partnerships as well. So if you own a company or high up in a company and you think that you could benefit from a partnership with the Flying T Club and that they could benefit from a partnership with you, go ahead and head over to flyingtclub.com to get all of the information you need on that today. Love our partnership with them. Very thankful for their efforts in the TCU NIL space. They are TCU's only NIL collective. So if you're looking to get involved in that area, flyingtclub.com is where you need to go. Also, a big thank you to Dave Campbell's Texas Football. We are a part of the Republic of Football Network, which is put on by DCTF. It is a podcast stream with every single D1 program in the state of Texas represented. That's 13 shows all in one podcast feed. Wherever you get your podcasts, all you've got to do is search Republic of Football Network, and you will get all of our TCU content, plus every other D1 school in the state of Texas. Not just the Texases and the Texas A&Ms either. We're talking Sam Houston State and Rice and Texas State, UTSA, UTEP, all of them. All of them, all of them, all of them. It's a really good time. If you get time to listen to those shows, I would highly recommend it. You learn a lot by listening to these guys. They're the best of the best that cover all of the football programs in the state of Texas. It's a good time, and we're grateful to be a part of that organization as well. All right, folks. That's enough podcast business. Obviously, if you're watching this on the YouTube channel, you can see that I have paid out the bet. You guys got us to 1,000 subscribers. We're over 1,200 subscribers now, by the way, so you guys are going crazy. Thank you so much. We really appreciate you. And Melissa put out a poll and said, hey, what do you guys want this knucklehead to do? And you guys voted for mustache. I know you technically voted for handlebar mustache. We're going to let it grow. It's growing for a full week. See, we can kind of pull it up and twist a little bit here on the ends. So maybe we'll do a little mini handlebar for, I missed a spot shaving here. Oops. Anyways, don't look at yourself while you're recording. It's embarrassing. We've got a mustache. It's going to be up through Sunday. I'm going to have the mustache through Sunday. You can already tell that the beard is starting to make a comeback. I'm thankful for that because I forgot It's been like 4 years since I shaved. I forgot what my chin looked like, and I'm very, very desperate for the beard to grow back. But the mustache will be around for at least a week. Who knows? Maybe it'll grow on me. I think I look pretty dang good. Get me some aviators, I could be in Top Gun right now. That's all I'm saying. Get me a flannel shirt, I could be on Yellowstone. I'm versatile. I'm flexible. This mustache rocks in a bunch of different ways. Anywho, this is my part of the payout for getting us to 1,000 subscribers on the YouTube channel. Melissa's part of the payout is coming on Saturday after the Arizona game. I bought her the saltiest chip in the world. She's going to be doing the Salt Chip Challenge from Amon G. Carter Stadium right after TCU-Arizona. So keep your eyes peeled for a live stream on the YouTube channel of that. You're not going to want to miss her eating that devastatingly salty chip. I think it's going to be pretty funny. So yes, that'll be on the YouTube channel on Saturday night at some point. Whenever the TCU and Arizona game ends is when we'll go live doing that. And the mustache is here. It's paid out. We're ready to rock. Okay, but now the real reason why you all are here, let's go ahead and jump in to the Arizona preview. Melissa sits down with Justin Spears of the Arizona Daily Star and ESPN Tucson Radio. They have a really good conversation about this football game. It's the Horned Frogs, it's the Wildcats taking off at 2 o'clock on Saturday on ESPN+. Interesting game. The Frogs are favored by, I think, like 11 now. So I think it's the biggest margin by which TCU has been favored all year, if I'm not mistaken. So it should be pretty interesting. Arizona's coming off of a good win over Houston, 27-3. They've struggled so far this year, though. They are only 4-6, while TCU is 6-4. So should be a pretty interesting football game for Arizona's first season in the Big 12. But let's go ahead, and we're going to jump into that preview right now with Melissa and Justin.
Hello, everybody. Welcome to another preview episode of the Frogs Insider podcast, brought to you, as always, by the Flying T Club. We appreciate all that they do to support the podcast and, of course, TCU student athletes, as well as a special shout-out to Dave Campbell's Texas Football, who is naive enough to host the Frogs Insider podcast as part of the Republic of Football Network, where you can get a podcast for every Division I football program in Texas. It feels like it's been forever, but it's only been a couple weeks since we've gotten to do a preview episode as TCU's coming off their bye. They will welcome into town for the first time as conference mates the Arizona Wildcats. And to get to know everything about the Wildcats, I am very happy to have Justin Spears. And I got it, like I said, I asked him before how he wanted to be introduced. There's a laundry list of accomplishments that this man is a part of when it comes to Arizona football, but he is the beat reporter for the Arizona Daily Star. He is the host of Spears and Ali on ESPN, and I forgot the call numbers on that. I told you I was going to forget something.
Oh, you got to do the call numbers.
Hey, listen, we want people to want to listen and check you out. We have a great audience that loves football. So ESPN
1490.
I know,
or ESPN Tucson.
Or ESPN Tucson.
Yeah.
Justin, thank you so much for coming and hanging out and talking Arizona football with us.
Melissa, you're awesome. Thank you for inviting me. Glad to talk about some Arizona football with you guys. I'm very much looking forward to this game, and hopefully at some point in this interview, you can give me some recommendations for food to eat in Dallas.
Are you coming?
I am going to be going to Fort Worth.
Oh, so. Okay, yeah. So first things first, I'm going to correct you, and it's okay because you guys are new to the Big 12. You don't want to talk about TCU and say come into Dallas. We don't want to do that.
Fort Worth.
We want to establish you as a Fort Worth guy. You give me Fort Worth vibes, not Dallas vibes. You're better than that. Yeah. So we listen. I could do a 75-minute show just on barbecue restaurants. I'm encouraging you to try. But that's awesome that you'll be here. I'll be up there. Yeah. Jamie will be up there. We'll make sure you're well taken care of cool. Saturday in Fort Worth for sure. We'll talk about some of that on air, some of that off air. But it'll be a great experience for you. I will say the vibes around TCU football probably feel a little bit like the vibes around Arizona football right now, and that the fan base is minimally engaged. I think a couple of wins for the Frogs have people back locked in, but it's going to be interesting the Saturday before a holiday, a break that, a lot of people have the entire week off. It is Fan Appreciation Day. It is Senior Day, but the crowd for the Oklahoma State game was not great, and unfortunately, as we'll talk about, Arizona hasn't kind of been the draw that we thought they might be coming into the season. So kind of give us like your 30,000-foot view on where Arizona football sits today compared to kind of where you thought they might be this first year making the transition from the Pac-12 to the Big 12.
There's a lot to unpack there. And
yeah, that's true.
There is a lot to unpack there. Well, I mean, first and foremost, like you said, Arizona has not met the expectations that everyone thought, that going into the season. They were viewed as a team that maybe could get into the Big 12 title race, right? They had they have a very good quarterback receiver tandem in Noah Fafita and Tetairoa McMillan. And, you have to go back to last year because this is where the expectations come from. Last year they went 10-3. They beat Oklahoma in the bowl game. They have this magical season, but you think about everything that happened during that year. Well, their starting quarterback, Jaden DeLora, suffered an ankle injury. And then in comes Noah Fafita, this redshirt freshman, and he takes the offense, and Arizona just completely takes off. They go on this 7-game winning streak with Noah Fafita at the helm. And Arizona had a lightning in a bottle type of year because not only did they have this breath of fresh air of in Noah Fafita coming in, but they also had a left tackle in Jordan Morgan, who was a first-round pick by the Green Bay Packers. Jacob Cowing was an all Pac-12 wide receiver. He gets drafted. Tanner McLaughlin, he's a tight end that also gets drafted by the NFL. I think he got picked by the Cincinnati Bengals in the 4th round. So those are 3 NFL prospects that you're losing. In addition to that, you also have 9 scholarship defensive linemen that are also leaving too. And stopping the run was a big part of Arizona's defensive identity last year. So those guys are missing, but you look at the firepower that Arizona has. They still have a majority of the offensive line coming back. Noah Fafita is coming back. Tetairoa McMillan is the best wide receiver in college football, in my opinion. And then you also have, some other guys on defense coming back, like linebacker Jacob Manu, who led the Pac-12 in tackles a year ago. Preseason all Big 12 guy, right? Trayden Stukes. Takario Davis is a projected first-round pick at cornerback. So Arizona had a lot of firepower on both sides of the ball. And you thought, man, after Jed Fish leaving and going to Washington and all of these guys turning down Jed Fish for the most part, like they lost a few guys to UW, some guys enter the transfer portal. That happens. But the fact that they were able to keep a good chunk of the roster, really the nucleus of the guys that took them to a 10-3 season, you thought, hey, they might be able to double down in the Big 12 and compete for a conference championship. And with the expanded CFP, it's conceivable that we're talking about Arizona in the CFP mix, which is unbelievable considering they went 1-11 in 2021. But they had those expectations, and then they dealt with injuries on the offensive line. The play calling hasn't been a perfect match for what Arizona has on offense. And you lose Jacob Manu, your superstar linebacker, the heart and soul of the defense, to a season-ending leg injury. Trayden Stukes, Gunnar Baldonado on the back end. Between those two in the secondary, they combined for like 4,000 snaps. And you lose those two guys to season-ending injuries. So they've been dealing with a bunch of injuries. They've had a lot of bad things go their way, but these guys also have to take some accountability too. Coaching has not been a perfect match either in year 1 under Brent Brennan. So we all thought, hey, Arizona was going to be great. Right now, it's kind of do or die time for Arizona because right now they got 6 losses. They have to win TCU, or they have to beat TCU, and then they got to go and play ASU, which is having an incredible season.
The season Arizona was supposed to have, right?
It's amazing that ASU is actually having the year, like you said, Arizona's supposed to have, and Arizona is struggling right now when ASU was picked last in the preseason poll. So it's been a really wonky year. I feel bad for Brent Brennan because a lot of people down here in Tucson are already clamoring for this guy to lose his job and get fired. You feel like every single week right now, Brent Brennan is kind of coaching for his job, which shouldn't be the case because, this is Brent Brennan's dream job. He coached for Dick Tomey as a graduate assistant in 2000 when he first became a coach. So even though he went to UCLA, is a Bruin through and through, he started his coaching career at Arizona. He met his wife in Tucson. I think got married in Tucson too. So this guy wants to be here. This is his dream job. It's not like a Jed Fish situation where he's going to bolt after he has a good thing going at Arizona. This guy wants to be here for the long haul, but unfortunately, that seat's getting very warm for Brent Brennan. So it's a pretty weird situation overall.
You segue kind of perfectly into my next question. It's almost like you're a professional at this. But, I think we see it a lot in programs now where they're just not willing to give a head coach the time. He comes from San Jose State. I'm a NorCal kid. I'm a Sacramento native down here in Fort Worth now. So I know the Spartans well. Had a lot of success with that program in a situation that can be pretty challenging to be successful at. Making the transition, the Pac-12 and the Big 12 were not that dissimilar, but they were not that much alike either for the last couple of years. And so there is a jump. And then you mentioned, obviously, all of the other tangible impacts that were laid upon him coming into the season. That seat is warm, sure, because it's a disappointing season. But do you think the administration at Arizona understands that some of these things were beyond his control and are going to give him a little bit of a leash? Or do they feel such a drive to need to be competitive because there's still so many unknowns with the next 5 years of college football, where the Big 12 stands in that, and how the next round of realignment could shake out?
No, I think that Arizona's administration, they're very smart. They're going to look at everything. They know every single detail that led up to this point. And I feel bad for Brent Brennan in a lot of ways because, like I said earlier, losing 9 scholarship defensive linemen, that's a big blow. And when Brent Brennan first got to Arizona, because Jed Fish was under the impression that he was going to keep a majority of those defensive linemen that decided to enter the portal after he left. But the thing about the transfer portal that's so weird with the schedule is that when Brent Brennan was hired, it was already after the first window had closed. When you're trying to restore your roster and you're trying to add big bodies, defensive linemen, offensive linemen, that first window is where you find those guys.
We know. TCU fans totally understand.
You know what I mean? So and then after that point, it's slim pickings. Yeah. So when Brent Brennan came in, he was like, okay, let me figure out, the guys that I need to add. And, they went out and got, some guys that I think, are contributing, that I think that, will make an impact on Saturday against TCU. But, it's not a strength like it once was, because Arizona has struggled against the run this year. And I know that, it kind of seems like it maybe matches up well with TCU because TCU doesn't run the ball well.
Can't run the ball. Yeah. Other than Savion Williams,
they're one of their best receivers. So, this game's going to be very interesting. But I think that the administration, they're going to look at all the details and kind of give Brent Brennan some grace. And I give Brent Brennan some grace too, because no one expected the injuries to happen to Jacob Banu or Traden Stukes. They had a running back come in by the name of Ja'Cory Krosky-Merritt, who was one of the most highly touted running backs in all of college football last year in the portal. And now his eligibility is under the microscope by the NCAA. So he's dealing with some eligibility concerns. And this guy, he came out in the first game against his former team, New Mexico, ran for over 100 yards, looked great. I'm like, wow, this guy's going to be dynamite. He's going to be so fun to watch this year. And then NCAA says we're concerned about his eligibility. We don't know if he has any. It's crazy because he's a 6-year guy, but it's but you got a 9th-year guy at Miami. You got 7th-year, 8th-year guys all over the place. What is eligibility anymore? I have no idea.
Yeah, why are all of a sudden are they worried about the running back in Arizona? I mean, come on. There are guys that are in their 30s now playing college football. It's the NCAA, and we're neither of us are blue blood programs, so we don't get to have a say in these things, I guess. But let's talk a little bit about that defense and that run defense. TCU has certainly been able. And sorry, my dog, as per usual, the minute I start recording, decides he's got something very important to bark at in the backyard. So I don't know how well you can hear him, but he's losing his mind.
No, you're good.
Yeah. So TCU struggled to run the ball. It feels like week in and week out, they kind of find a little spark of something, but the best, as we mentioned earlier, the best running back on TCU's roster is their potential, day 2 NFL wide receiver. And so it's been fascinating to see how that's been really effective, and credit to TCU for finding something that works. But that run defense for Arizona has not been good. And there are some talented guys in the backfield for the Horned Frogs. I don't know that this is necessarily a breakout, but I'll be interested to see how much they try to test that run defense when the passing offense for TCU has been, for the most part, very, very good. So when you say like that, if you were game planning against the Wildcats, Are you going to just let Josh Hoover continue to rip it? Are you thinking a balanced attack could be successful? Where has Arizona been good, and where have they really struggled outside of just that basic run defense?
Well, now that the defense has dealt with a number of injuries, defensive coordinator Dwayne Aquina is trying to make chicken salad right now.
Yeah.
He's trying to put the pieces together and figure out what works. Now, Arizona has used a dime defense, so they have one linebacker, kind of a roaming defensive end, stand-up edge rusher type of guy that maneuvers around the D line, and then they got a bunch of defensive backs. Now, against teams that are good with the run, like West Virginia and UCF especially, they use that dime defense, and it's like, dude, you're just inviting the run, and that's exactly what happened. But they changed things up in this game against Houston because Houston has Zion Chris, a running quarterback. Now, Houston's offense is awful.
Hey, did you see what Houston did to TCU? I don't want to hear about Houston's offense is awful. They smoked TCU at home. So, okay. Yeah, we know, but whatever.
Well, besides the TCU game, they're having a weird year, and
they're terrible. It's
not
okay.
really scoring the ball.
Yeah.
But Zion Chris is a really good athlete, very mobile, athletic, and Arizona struggled against those kind of quarterbacks early on, like Avery Johnson from Kansas State. And so, I was wondering how that defense was going to work, but what they did was they would bring up the defensive backs and they would blitz those guys. And you didn't know if they were going to blitz or if they were going to drop back. They would put them on the line every single time, and you just had no idea what the defense was going to be. So that kind of defense, I think, is going to keep you on your toes. So I really think a balanced attack is probably going to be what TCU is going to go with. But because it's Sonny Dykes, he loves to throw the ball around. They have great athletes at wide receiver.
Yeah.
Like, they have so many playmakers that can really test Arizona's secondary. So, yeah, I expect a really big offensive performance by Josh Hoover.
Yeah, it'll be interesting because TCU's last 4 games have been probably 4 of their most complete games of the season since that really humiliating Houston loss. And we've seen Josh Hoover's pass attempts come down pretty much weekly as a result. And so because they found something with Savion Williams in the backfield, because they've had just enough success running the ball to keep defenses honest, then I think that's why Hoover his turnovers have come down. He's had more efficient games, even if they haven't been as explosive. You make me a little nervous knowing that they're going to send athletic type corners maybe in blitz packages, because TCU's offensive line has been iffy. We've seen a couple of freshmen, or we've seen a freshman play. We anticipate seeing another freshman play the last 2 games. And that's not something they're going to be accustomed to seeing, and they're certainly not seeing it in practice. So that's going to be the fascinating kind of chess game here is, can those semi-exotic blitzes, cause Josh Hoover problems? And when he has been under pressure, he has shown a tendency to throw the ball to the wrong team. So that could be really, really interesting. He's had a couple of strip sacks too. So yeah, great. Cool. Feeling great about that. That's awesome. Good news.
Well, strip sacks, and I think Arizona, correct me if I'm wrong, but I think they're 3rd in the Big 12 in forced fumbles. So yeah, that's another thing
perfect. Yes, that's cool
to look forward to.
Yeah. So say like this, it's a fascinating dichotomy here of 2 teams that are very, very desperate, not for that dissimilar of reasons, to get a win here on Saturday afternoon. Let's flip the ball to the fun side for Arizona, because as you mentioned, Noah Fifita and Tet McMillan, one of the more dynamic duos in the conference, certainly. You absolutely, I think, are right in asserting McMillan. You could maybe argue a couple other guys as being the top receiver in college football, but he's absolutely in the conversation. And, depending on how you view Travis Hunter, he's arguably the best or second best wide receiver in the conference, in a conference that's loaded with wide receivers too. So TCU has not faced a great passing attack this season. The one time that we expected them to be challenged was against Texas Tech. Starting quarterback gets hurt. Baylor really won that game running the football, but got some timely passing yardage from Sawyer Robertson as well. So what do you think that those 2 guys can do against the TCU pass defense that hasn't been tested nearly to the level that they're going to be tested on Saturday afternoon?
Yeah. Well, I think honestly, the one thing that has been really impressive about Arizona's passing attack beyond just Tetero and McMillan has been Chris Hunter. He is a native of New Orleans. and actually came in at the same time as T-Mac, but is on two totally different paths, right? T-Mac is going to be a top 10 pick in the draft, probably, when it's all said and done. Where Chris Hunter, he first came in as a walk-on, was kind of quietly put on scholarship and has really worked his way up in practice. And Arizona has been in dire need of a wide receiver too, a 1A to Tetairoa McMillan. Because remember, told you last year they had Jacob Cowing and Tanner McLaughlin, two NFL guys. They lose them and also three running backs, and that were very much involved in the passing game. They were trying to find that next guy. And I think Arizona has found that guy as of late in Chris Hunter. He started the last 3 games against UCF. Now, again, they lost by 44 points to UCF, but he broke out for 102 yards and is the only pass catcher besides Tetairoa McMillan to have over 100 receiving yards in a game. So I think now that they have a guy like that available, look for him to maybe have a big game against TCU. But, T-Mac has been just really an absolute treat to watch. And it sucks because I'm like, man, we're only going to watch this guy play for 2 more games because he is the best receiver in Arizona football history. As a matter of fact, he's only 112 yards away from becoming Arizona's all-time leading receiver. So
I'm going to call it right now. He's going to get that on Saturday.
Well, I mean, you also have that ASU game coming up here, and let's say TCU beats Arizona, keeps them out of a bowl game. Then the Territorial Cup, T-Mac getting the record, that turns into kind of an event in itself. Yeah. But if he gets the record on Saturday, that would be special. And if he honestly gets the record, maybe Arizona is in contention to maybe pull off the upset on Saturday. We'll see. But I think the thing about T-Mac is he's 6'4", long, has a catch radius, kind of like a Larry Fitzgerald type of player. Like if you look at Larry Fitzgerald coming out of college, and I think 2003, his last year at Pitt, you look at his highlight tape, it looks just like T-Mac's tape. And his yards after catch, he's very athletic. Like he is everything you would want in a wide receiver. And sometimes when him and Noah Fafita, when they play backyard football and kind of improvise a little bit, it's really special to watch because these guys have been teammates literally since the 8th grade.
Yeah.
They played Pop Warner together. They were in high school. Like they have a connection unlike a lot of receivers and quarterbacks have in college football right now. So, yeah, if those guys get going, that'll be truly something special to watch because T-Mac's a really great wide receiver.
I think they're going to have a big day. TCU's pass rush has really struggled. They've had some injuries along the defensive front. Nothing like what Arizona. Hey, don't you even think about it, Bauer. What Arizona has had to deal with, but certainly their share of issues. They're getting a couple guys back. We expect on Saturday, but they won't have played, I think, in about a month. And so it'll be interesting to see if the Frogs can generate enough pressure to keep Fafita on his toes, but also he's a pretty good athlete in the pocket. It might not matter. So let's talk a little bit just kind of briefly about Noah Fafita and his performance. Such high expectations coming into the season. It was kind of him, Shedeur Sanders were the 2 guys looked at as being the best quarterbacks in the conference. Do you think that he's delivered despite the struggles around him? It feels like we've seen some games where he's been the guy we expected him to be, and then he's struggled at times as well. Where do you kind of place his season as far as relative to the expectations?
I would definitely say a little disappointing. Just because of what he was able to do last season. But I also don't put a lot of that on him because of the offensive line issues. I mean, Arizona now has 6 different starting offensive lines this season.
Jeez.
They're just rotating guys and, players are out for the season and then they're moving, Jonas Savianaya, who's a first round pick from right tackle over to left tackle. So they're moving pieces around and it has not been as stable as it was a year ago. So he had that luxury. He doesn't have that luxury anymore, but they definitely have done more empty backfields and are trying to figure out ways to get the ball out of his hands quick to combat that pass coverage and getting to the quarterback and getting to him. But I think that really Noah Fafita is a quarterback that is very cerebral. He's very just calm, and he's been able to utilize his legs and get out of some really hard situations. So I think that the next step for Noah Fafita right now is to figure out a way to get T-Mac that record, and then see what he's got moving forward. I expect Noah Fafita to come back next season because obviously he's not draft ready and he's a little undersized right now. But I think that Noah Fafita is a great quarterback, and you know what? He was the one who got Arizona these expectations because when Jet Fish left, he got the team together. They had a players only meeting, and Noah Fafita was the one who led the charge in getting a lot of these guys to come back. So, but as far as his season, he's thrown interceptions. Some of them are not his fault, right? Some of them are off receivers' hands, but he's been a little negative when it comes to decision making. But I think overall, he's had a really good season, and he's a positive for Arizona, no matter which way you splice it. He's the ultimate leader and a really good quarterback.
Yeah, I was so impressed with him at Big 12 Media Days. I mean, just seems like the kind of guy you want leading your football team. Kind of the same as Josh Hoover. Is you tend to live a little bit more with the mistakes because you trust the work that they put in and the development cycle that they're in. I'll be fascinated to see the game plan for him because I think he's certainly more than capable of doing a lot of what Sawyer Robertson had success against TCU with, and then he has a receiver that is far head and shoulders above just about anybody that Baylor could put on the field. So it's going to be interesting to see that matchup play out. The running game, like you mentioned, the guy they thought was going to be the guy hasn't had the opportunity to be the guy, but the running attack has still been really solid. You've got guys that can pick up chunks of yards. TCU's run defense has certainly been a weakness for the Frogs. The games that they've won, they've been able to shut down or contain some really good running backs. The games that they've lost, UCF, Baylor, you had guys absolutely running wild, Zion Chris at Houston. So how do you think that there's an opportunity, despite the line issues, for the running game to have success Saturday? Or do you think that at this point in the season, that struggle is really being exasperated?
Well, now that they think they have stability at the offensive line or on the offensive line, they just moved Joey Capra in at right tackle. He's a very interesting story. He actually was training to be an EMT. He was done playing at Nevada, and then all of a sudden on August 5th, he gets a call from Arizona saying, "Hey, you've got one more year of eligibility, and your name's in the portal. Do you want to come play offensive line?" And he was originally coming to play guard in center, but because of all the injuries, they said, "Hey, you got experience at right tackle. Go out there and play." So they put him at right tackle. Of course, Jonas Savianaya is a superstar at left tackle. Maybe if the offensive line, now that there's stability and they know who those guys are, maybe they can, play downhill and, look to really run the football, because that has not been effective for Arizona. And even the first half against Houston last week, Arizona did not really do well running the football. I think in like 10 quarters, they had like 85 net yards. So that shows you just how bad the running game has been for Arizona. But I think with Quali Conley playing clean, he had 2 fumbles in the previous games leading up to the Houston win. So if he can protect the football, I think he's going to have a really solid game against TCU. He had a 50-yard touchdown run against Houston the other night or last week, and ran for over 100 yards for the first time in a while. So I think Quali Conley is a really good running back. And look for the Texan, the hometown kid. I wouldn't say he's hometown. He's from Houston, but he's a Texas guy. His name is Kedrick Reesano, and he was a former 4-star running back. Went to Ole Miss. Things didn't work out well. Went back to Arizona, and now that Ja'Cory Krosky-Merritt is out of the picture, he's been moved up a spot on the depth chart and is that secondary running back. He's built like a tank. He's the guy that's going to relieve Quali Conley every now and again, but Conley, for the most part, is the running back that you're going to want to look for. And not only did Ja'Cory Krosky-Merritt have eligibility concerns, but Rayshon Speedy Luke, a guy that they were expecting to rely on this year, after 4 games, decided to say, "You know what? I'm going to redshirt this year." So Arizona, the running backs, that group has definitely has taken a hit but they're trying to manage through that. But yeah, the running game, it has not been what it was last year, but they definitely had an encouraging second half against Houston.
I always like to finish, not necessarily by asking for a score prediction, but framing it more this way. If Arizona has won, what has gone right for them? If they fail to do so, what has gone wrong?
I think if they win, what went right for the Wildcats is, one, they won the turnover battle. If you look at the last two wins against Houston, against Utah, which was on the road against Salt Lake City, outside of the Utah game, Arizona has gotten waxed on the road.
Yeah.
But they won that turnover battle against Utah. They won the turnover battle against Houston. They also held both of those teams to 0 for 4 on fourth down. So I think defense really has to come up with some stops. Offense has to make the timely plays. I really feel like in a game like this, you can't stall out the way you did against Houston, because in that first half, they had 4 3-and-outs in that first half. You can't have that when you have Josh Hoover and all those other guys on the other side that are going to be scoring touchdowns and are going to be putting up a lot of points. So I think if Arizona can figure out a way to keep up with TCU and maybe score first, you already know they're going to pass the football one way or another. Whether they're up by 2 touchdowns or down by 2 touchdowns, TCU is going to throw the football.
Yeah.
So figure out a way to get up early on them, turn this into a track meet. And then when you're on defense, if you can come up with some stops, if you can create some takeaways, whether it's interceptions or all those fumbles, like I mentioned earlier, that I think that could be a winning recipe for Arizona. And honestly, I think the running game has to be effective too. The more Josh Hoover and all those guys are on the sideline, the better. So time of possession is very, very critical for the Wildcats here. And if they lose, everything that I just said, the exact opposite.
The opposite, yeah.
Yeah. You know, like
reverse
they don't control time of possession. Like, it's kind of the same with TCU, but of course TCU is going to score a lot more points. I think, you know, if they allow TCU to get up early and it takes away Arizona's rushing attack and it forces Arizona to throw the ball more, TCU has a really good passing defense, right? Those defensive backs are pretty physical. They're not?
No. TCU's pass defense looks good because teams are running so easily against them. Lost their top 2 corners to injury before the season started. We've seen something with Channing. Canada's a pretty physical guy. You know, I think you've got Abe Kamara is a pretty physical guy.
Because I saw they have the 3rd best passing defense in the Big 12, and I'm like, whoa.
Well, and again, that is a fair thing to assume, because why would you be watching TCU football up until the point to get prepared? But again, if you look at, I wonder where they rate, like when you factor in a number of attempts against them, because look at the passing offenses and quotes they played. Because like I said, the only really solid passing attack the Frogs have faced was Tech. Tech jumped up huge on TCU, and then Morton got hurt. And so then the true freshman now TCU was already making a run prior to that, so it's not just that factor, but the true freshman comes in, goes like 9 for 10, and then becomes a true freshman on the field. UCF didn't really have to throw the ball. Baylor did throw the ball a little bit more than you expect, but had a running back go for 4 touchdowns in that game, and that's how they won that game.
Okay.
So, I mean, TCU's schedule has been pretty soft in avoiding kind of the high-flying passing attacks. Like I said, this is far and away the best quarterback and receiving combo that TCU will face this year. And it's not even close. They've missed Colorado. They didn't even have to deal with Kansas State this year. Oklahoma State Alan Bowman needs to file for AARP. I mean, there's just, their numbers look great, but they haven't really been tested. Now, I do think that there's enough veteran experience back there to where they could have some success, but yeah, it's going to be, I think you'll be able to pass the ball against TCU. I think you're absolutely right. Like, it's so cliche to say, but this is going to come down to which team turns it over less or at all, because I think both teams are going to have the opportunity to we could absolutely see a shootout Saturday afternoon in Fort Worth. Would not surprise me whatsoever.
So you're saying this is fool's gold? the passing defense. Wow.
Yeah.
Okay.
And again, like, we haven't, the only team that, like, there's two teams that TCU got up big against, Oklahoma State, which has quit at this point in the season, frankly, and then UCF, and UCF was able to come back from, I think it was 38-13 with like 5 minutes left in the third quarter, and UCF came back mostly by running the ball because they were knocking off 30-yard runs like it was nothing. So I don't know how good TCU's pass defense is when it needs to be, because we haven't really seen them in a situation where that's been required.
Okay.
I mean, Isaac Wilson, not it. Like KJ Jefferson got benched shortly after beating TCU. Jaden Daniels at Stanford. I mean, they have an elite, wide receiver duo, but he just isn't very good.
Yeah.
As a passing quarterback. So yeah, and then you've got Alan Bowman, you've got Baron Morton. I mean, they haven't faced really an elite quarterback this year. That's what I think why TCU fans are disappointed, is the schedule was set up for the Frogs to really be in the mix, and you drop that Houston game, you drop the UCF game when you have a big lead, and all of a sudden you go from being right in the mix for a Big 12 championship if you win Saturday to just needing an obscene amount of help to get to Arlington. So yeah, that's to say, like, it's going to be a really fascinating game, and I would not at all be surprised to see, both teams in the 40s.
Well, let me ask you this. Okay, so what would you trust more in this game, TCU's rushing defense or the passing defense?
Oh my God.
To make a play.
I'm going to go the pass defense only because Bud Clark's been there. Abe Kamara's been there. Channing Canada's looked decently better. Okay. Like, he's stepped in. But that's like asking, like, which half of the baby would you like to separate? It just... Yeah, with the defense looked really good against the run when they could focus on just stopping the run.
Yeah.
Right. So when there wasn't the threat of a really competent passer, they really, really did a great job at Utah. They did a good job against Oklahoma State. They did a good job against Texas Tech. But I'm going to say the pass defense just because I haven't seen that be the way TCU has lost a game yet this year.
Okay.
It's not really like the most glowing response, but that's honest, I suppose.
And the reason why I ask is because I feel like if Arizona isn't running the ball effectively, that spells trouble, because I feel like TCU's rushing defense hasn't been that good this year.
Oh no, it's been bad. Jamie has told me I have to stop using the word abhorrent because I got really into it for like 2 weeks. But abhorrent was the word I was describing. We celebrated Taj Brooks getting, I think he had over 100 yards, but he really did have to work so hard for those 100 yards. Like, that's kind of where we're at right now. Is like, hey, Ollie Gordon had a pretty good game, but it was in a game that was lost. I mean, almost from the coin flip, because Oklahoma State has just so given up. So, I think you'll be able to. I think Arizona will pick up yards on the ground. I think they'll be able to stay balanced enough to keep the TCU defense honest. But this is primed to be two quarterbacks approaching the 400-yard mark. Would not surprise me whatsoever if we end up getting that kind of game. Now, because I said that, it's going to be 13-9. But I would not be shocked at all for this to be like, I've been wanting like the Baker Mayfield, Pat Mahomes redo this year. I really thought Colorado and Texas Tech were going to give us that in Lubbock. They did not. They let me down. And so now I'm like, maybe it's this random Arizona TCU game that no one's going to pay attention to. And all of a sudden in the fourth quarter, it's kind of like Baylor, West Virginia was in Morgantown last weekend, right? Just totally unhinged. I am here for unhinged football. Yeah. Like let's have fun, right? Like you guys are playing for bowl eligibility. TCU is playing to get in a bowl that doesn't suck. Both are very important things. I want to see the Horned Frogs do well, but like at this point in November, I am here for unhinged football. We're going to have an absolutely beautiful weather day. It's a 2 p.m. kickoff. It's finally not a night game that keeps me up to 1 a.m. Like, I am here. Let's just have some fun and let's just see some really entertaining old school air raid football. Like, totally here for that.
I'm totally down.
Yeah, it'll be a good time. We'll get you some good barbecue.
Yes.
We'll get you squared away. We'll tell you the spots you need to hit up, and then we'll just watch some unhinged football and have a great time. It'll be a blast.
And it's on ESPN Plus.
So no one cares.
So everyone's gonna be like, "Yo, what's going on? ESPN
Yeah.
Plus,
I
Big
would
12 after brunch. I love it."
absolutely. I want us to be the kind of game that people have to put in the multi-view because they're like, this is insane and
Yeah.
super, super fun. And then I hope TCU wins. I mean, obviously, because I am a homer. But Justin, thank you so much for taking time. We're gonna have to chat again ahead of basketball season because I just want to know like what the Arizona fan base thinks about just being in this absolutely insane basketball conference and how nuts this is going to be. And I know that, we're supposed to be, football podcast here, but I just cannot wait for Big 12 basketball. I'm cautiously terrified.
Well, speaking of basketball, I talked about this with Jamie on the radio show. TCU fans and Arizona fans, they both dislike Eddie Lampkin and Kirk Kriisa.
Yeah. Oh.
Yeah.
Oh God. Yeah. Like Eddie, I can't harbor any ill will towards Eddie. It's like the mom in me. I'm not a mom, but this is like the teacher in me, maybe of like I'm just disappointed. Like I'm not mad. I'm just disappointed. Kirk Kriisa, if I met him in public, like I would probably have to be restrained of the things I just want to say. I don't know why he just raises my hackles and gets me so. I mean, I know exactly why, but that dude, I'm just like, bro, like, no.
I was there. I was there at the game.
So
and
yeah,
I was covering Arizona basketball, and I'll just never forget him looking at the TCU fans walking off the court, doing the horns, and just balloons going up. Look at that.
That's so delightful.
But yeah, him looking at the TCU fans, and I'm like, man, TCU fans are going to forever hate this man.
It was a foul. Like I'm just gonna say it. It was a foul.
It was.
It was. Okay. We're cool. We're good. We can agree with this. No, it's fine. Well, Justin, once again, just tell everybody where they can find your work and dive deep into the lore of the Arizona Wildcats.
Yeah, so you can find all my coverage of Arizona football on Tucson.com. You can also check me out on X, the social media app formerly known as Twitter, at Justin E Sports. And then Spears and Ali, we just did our interview with Jamie. You can check out that interview on the Spears and Ali podcast.
Awesome. Thank you so much. I really appreciate you taking the time. And we'll look forward to welcome you to Fort Worth, not
Fort
Dallas,
Worth. Yes.
on Saturday.
Can't wait, Melissa. Thank you.
All right. Big thanks to Justin for taking the time out of his busy week. I know that he's going in a bunch of different directions. I hopped on his radio show earlier this week as well to talk about the game. Super thankful for him and his time taken out to do this show with Melissa for you guys. Let's jump in. I got a couple news and notes here. Want to talk about really quick. First of all, Jack Besh, we all know he's having a great season. He's at 56 catches, 982 yards. He's 18 yards off the 1,000-yard mark. He's got 9 receiving touchdowns already this season. He was named to the Biletnikoff Finalist Award, so he is officially a semifinalist for the award that goes to the best receiver in the country every single year. Jack Besh is on that award. I think he's like 5th right now in the country in receiving yards. Hopefully Josh can feed him the ball over these next 2 weeks so that he can be a finalist and be up for that prestigious award, because it's always good to have Horned Frogs as finalists for those national awards. So shout out to Jack. He's having a fantastic season. If you go back to the Flying T Club's Instagram account, by the way, you can see pictures of Jack doing some of the volunteer work, but not just going through the motions and being there because he needs to be there to check a box or whatever. He stayed for several hours after everybody else had left and continued playing with kids and getting to know them and hanging out with their families. So good guy Jack Besh for the win. Now he's good guy Jack Besh, Biletnikoff semifinalist. Hopefully he continues on down that road towards winning that award. Also, TCU picked up a pretty big commitment for the 2025 class. Terry Shelton, a 4-star wide receiver, has committed to the Horned Frogs. He's the number 71 overall recruit for the 2025 class, the number 12 wide receiver. And he was recently committed to Arizona. He was the top commit in Arizona's class. That class is starting to crumble a little bit because the Wildcats aren't doing well in year 1 under Brent Brennan. And Shelton is now a Horned Frog. He decommitted from Arizona and then was on campus for his official visit at TCU a day later and committed a day after that, or at least announced his commitment a day after that. So Terry Shelton now is a Horned Frog, or committed to being a Horned Frog. He will sign early. He will enroll early as well. And he bumps TCU up to the number 20 class in the country, according to 247sports.com. So top 20 class for your TCU Horned Frogs because of Terry Shelton. And they're not done yet, folks. Keep your eyes open. Keep your ears to the ground, because it's my understanding that TCU will add a couple more commitments before this cycle is over to what is already a very impressive class for Sonny Dykes and his coaching staff. So excited to see where the rest of the class goes, and excited to get to the early signing period, which starts on December 4th, where these guys can start locking in their commitments, and quite a few early enrollees as well in this class. Maybe we'll get the great Jeremy Clark, my cohort over at hornfrogblitz.com, to come on the show and talk a little bit about some of these kids in the 2025 class, because nobody covers football recruiting like Jeremy Clark does. All right. Last thing before we hop out of here for the day. If you have been paying attention over the past couple of months, you've seen likely that there has been this lawsuit between Warner Brothers and the NBA. Warner Brothers, of course, are the parent company of Turner Sports, which is TNT and TBS and True TV and all of those channels that you love to watch TV on. But really, more importantly, they used to be a media rights holder for the NBA. The NBA opted to select a different contract this time around than TNT's contract. I believe it was with Amazon. And so TNT filed a lawsuit because they say that they made a competitive offer. And because of some of the terms of previous agreements and the way that these media rights deals work, if TNT makes a competitive offer, the NBA was obligated to take their contract, but instead they chose Amazon's, went into a legal battle over it. Well, they've recently settled. And as a part of the settlement, kind of buried in the settlement, Ross Dellinger for Yahoo Sports was reporting on this earlier this week. I tweeted about it as well a couple of days before his article came out. ESPN is sublicensing some of the Big 12's football games and basketball games to TNT over the course of 6 years. So this is going to start in the fall of 2025, so next fall. And each year for 6 years, starting next fall, ESPN is going to sublicense, I believe it's, 13 football games and 15 basketball games to Warner Brothers, which means that those games will be moving to TNT and TBS. So it's 28 total games each year for the next 6 years that will be on TNT or TBS, 13 football games, 15 basketball games. That's to fill some of the time slots that TNT and TBS would have previously run the NBA. So it's kind of to fill the gaps in their TV schedule with some Big 12 content. Now, the good thing, I think this is a good thing for Brett Yormark in the Big 12, is that these were games that would have otherwise been on ESPN+. So they're moving from streaming only to linear television and a simulcast streaming option on Max. So the former HBO Max streaming service, now titled Max, you can watch all of these games that way as well. So if you already have a Max subscription, you're already good to go watching all of these games. If you already have cable TV, you're already good to go watching all of these games. So it's a really interesting concept. It puts more Big 12 football and more Big 12 basketball on linear television, which, despite all of the move towards streaming and cable cutting that we've seen over the last decade or so, linear TV is still kind of King Kong. And getting more of your product on linear TV is good. Now, you're going to hear me say that, and you're going to say, well, Jamie, wasn't it just a few months ago that you were criticizing the ACC for putting so many of their highly leveraged games on the CW? And yes, I was, and I will continue to do that, because the CW is not even remotely close to TNT or TBS as far as ratings are concerned, as far as production quality is concerned when it comes to live sporting events, simply because TBS and TNT have been doing it for so much longer, right? You're talking about the media company that puts on the NCAA tournament every year. So I think they've got a pretty good grasp on what it takes to produce live basketball. and specifically produce live college basketball. So it's, I think, a really great deal, especially for the Big 12 basketball, to be more on linear TV. You're going to see games like, for instance, this upcoming in a couple weeks, you've got TCU and Arizona, Big 12 conference game, first game of the year for both teams in conference. That's only going to be on ESPN Plus. But in future years, that's a game that would probably be on TNT or TBS. So it's a good move for the conference. It's a great move by Brett Yormark to get more of their product on linear television with a TV, with a media company that is competent and capable of producing those events well. In return, or this is in return for Inside the NBA, everybody's favorite NBA show with Chuck and Ernie and Shaq, going to ESPN. So ESPN is getting a sub-license agreement for that show, and in return, part of the return is that Warner Brothers will get those 28 Big 12 events a year for the next 6 years. Pretty interesting stuff. I think it's going to end up as a positive for the Big 12. I think that they're going to benefit from that extra exposure. Anything you can do at this point, if you're the Big 12, right, to continue to put yourself in a good position to have eyeballs on your games, to have people, especially in football, with the college football playoff rankings, the way that those are working right now, it's going to be really important over the next several years to make sure that you are putting yourself in front of enough people to make a compelling argument for your league, to make a compelling argument for your teams down the stretch when you get into this late November situation where you're going to have to start fighting for some of the spots at the table in this playoff format. So really good move by Brett Yormark, really good move by the Big 12. Thankful that this is a part of the settlement, and we're going to see kind of how it goes from there. It should be pretty interesting to see how it all plays out over the next 6 years, because the reality is 6 years from now, Lord knows what college athletics is going to look like. That's so far down the road, right? We could see 5 or 6 major changes by then. And so to have yourself set up a little bit more to be, have a little bit more of a permanent linear space, I think is good for the Big 12 overall. Okay. I think that's going to do it for this episode of Frogs Insider. Thankful for you guys listening and hanging in there. Thankful again to Justin Spears for his time on the podcast today. We will be back Saturday night with a little bit of a quick live show right after the game, right after the press conferences go live. So Melissa can do her salt chip challenge. We'll break down some of TCU and Arizona's game right there. And then, of course, we'll be back in your ears on the podcast feed on Monday morning with our full recap and conversation, including some hoops talk in there as well, because we got some basketball games coming up for the ladies that we will break down as well. So until then, we will talk to you next time. I'm Jamie Plunkett on behalf of Melissa Treebwasser. Go Frogs.